Most avoidants don't apologize the way you expect. You won't get a dramatic confession. You won't see a flood of regretful messages or a heartfelt conversation where they suddenly break down in tears. Instead, you get silence, disconnection, sometimes even strange, contradictory behavior, as if they're trying to act like nothing happened while you're left alone, sitting with all the emotional weight of the fallout. And it makes you wonder, do they even feel guilty? Do they even care? Here's the truth that most people miss. Avoidants do feel guilt, but they don't process it the same way you do. They don't show it the way you might expect. And unless you understand how their mind works, you'll keep thinking they're heartless when really, they're scared. You see, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, admitting they hurt someone brings up a deep, often buried fear. I'm not enough. I'm defective. I'm bad. That fear doesn't just sting, it consumes them. So what do? They run. Not always physically, but emotionally. They disconnect, they go cold, they push you away. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels dangerous. It threatens the emotional armor they've spent years building. An apology means lowering that armor, and for an avoidant, that's terrifying. Now here's the shift. If you truly want an avoidant to apologize, you have to stop trying to force it. You have to stop chasing closure with words, because closure, real closure, doesn't come from them. It starts with you. It starts with what you do, not what you demand. Let's be real. When someone hurts you, your first instinct is to make them see it. You want them to understand the pain they caused. You want them to take responsibility. But when you come at an avoidant with emotional pressure, even if your pain is valid, even if your anger is justified, they don't absorb the message. They absorb the shame. And shame to an avoidant is not a motivator. It's a trigger, a shutdown switch. So what happens? Instead of leaning in, they pull away even more. Instead of apologizing, they might deflect, get defensive, or disappear entirely. And that only deepens the wound. But what if I told you the path to a real, heartfelt apology is not through confrontation, but through calm detachment? It's not about punishing them with silence. It's about protecting your peace and letting your stillness do the talking. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing the apology, the moment you stop trying to fix what's broken between you, is the moment they start to feel the space they created. That emotional vacuum, it's deafening, and it forces them to face what they've been avoiding, their own responsibility. When you're no longer there trying to hold the connection together, when you're not pleading, explaining, or justifying, they're left with a question they can't escape. Did I push away someone who actually cared about me? Was this my fault? And in that silence, something happens. Something avoidants rarely allow themselves to feel: remorse. But not just because you left with grace, with dignity, with emotional self-respect. You didn't explode, you didn't beg, you didn't shut down to punish. You simply said, through your energy, not your words, "This is my boundary, and I'm done bleeding for someone who won't even acknowledge the wound." That kind of clarity, that kind of self-possession, it's magnetic, especially to someone who fears emotional chaos. Avoidants are used to emotional pressure. They're used to being pursued, blamed, or frozen out. But when you detach with peace, you create a contrast so sharp it stings. Because now they're no longer reacting to your emotional storm. They're left sitting in the silence of their own choices. And that's where their self-protective bubble starts to crack. Now, here's the beautiful irony. When you no longer need their apology, that's when it often comes. But don't expect it to be wrapped in poetic words or emotional outbursts. Avoidants apologize in ways that may feel subtle, even awkward. But if you know how to look, you'll see it. It might come in the form of effort. They show up randomly. They ask how you're doing. They fix something you mentioned weeks ago. They send a message that feels out of the blue but carries a strange weight. It's their way of saying, I know I messed up. I'm trying to reconnect. I just don't know how to say it out loud. That's the apology. Not always verbal, but intentional. And you'll feel it in their energy, not just their words. But here's the important part. You don't have to accept breadcrumbs. You're not required to tolerate delay or half-effort just because someone shows signs of regret. But if you sense genuine humility, even if it's clumsy, that's something to acknowledge. Because humility is the foundation of change, not perfection, not performance. Humility. Now let's talk psychology for a second. Avoidants often fear that admitting they hurt someone will make them unlovable, that the weight of their mistake will drown them in shame. So they pretend nothing happened. They avoid the conversation. They distract themselves with work, hobbies, or someone new. But the guilt doesn't go away, it just gets buried. And the only way for it to surface safely is when they see that you're not trying to shame them. You're simply not willing to be hurt again. You become a mirror, not a weapon. You reflect truth, but you don't attack. And that reflection is what they start to respond to. They may inch toward you slowly. They may say things like, "I've been thinking about everything," or "I know I didn't handle things well." And while that may not be the full apology you dreamed of, it's a doorway. Now, there's a trap here, and it's subtle. When you see them pulling back in, it's tempting to test them, to see if they've changed, to withdraw just to provoke more reaction. But that's not healing, that's control. And control always backfires. If you want a sincere apology from an avoidant, you have to stop performing. You have to stop using strategy. You have to act from your truth, not your fear. That means your boundaries are real, not bait, not manipulation, but honest, self-honoring lines in the sand. Like, I want connection, but not at the cost of my peace. I'm willing to talk, but not to be gaslit. I care, but I won't chase. And let's be brutally honest here. This won't work with everyone. If the avoidant is abusive, narcissistic, or chronically self-unaware, you may never get that apology. Not because you didn't do the right thing, but because they don't have the emotional tools to offer it. Some people simply won't grow. They won't look in the mirror, and they'll spend their lives running from accountability. This approach is not about tolerating harm. It's about creating an emotional environment where growth is possible, if the person is willing. And if they're not, you still win. Because you didn't lose yourself trying to fix someone else. You stood in truth. You protected your peace. And you chose self-respect over chasing closure. And that is powerful. In relationships, we're taught that healing comes from confrontation. That if we just explain our pain enough, someone will finally understand. But avoidants aren't wired that way. Confrontation feels like a threat, and threats cause shutdown. But calm accountability, that creates safety. You're not dragging them to an apology. You're simply saying, here's who I am, here's how I love, and here's what I will no longer tolerate. So when they finally say the words, "I'm sorry I hurt you," it will mean something. Because they had to fight their own fear to get there. They had to walk through their shame and still choose connection. That's not just an apology, that's transformation. So here's what to do now. Step back, stand tall, stop arguing for your pain. Stop convincing someone to care. Let your silence be sacred, not spiteful. Let your boundaries speak. Let them come forward, not from pressure, but from choice. Because when an avoidant chooses to apologize, they're not just saying sorry. They're saying, I see you, I value you, I want to do better. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. except for the unwavering presence of your own self-respect. That's when the shift happens. That's when the healing begins. Not just for them, but for you too. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your power doesn't come from forcing someone to apologize. It comes from the way you rise, the way you respond, and the way you protect your peace. Stop chasing clarity from chaos. Become the clarity, and watch who rises to meet you.